Welcome to Pittsburgh Sports Memories Podcast. I'm Steve Wirt.
I'm Tim Hannon.
On today's list, we're going to let the hate flow. This is the most reviled people in Pittsburgh sports history. These are people that have played sports here or just major sports figures. We have owners, politicians. It's a motley crew. So we're going to have some fun today and hopefully not get any lawsuits from the really rich people that we're insulting.
Yeah. And so, two things about how we're going to do this. One is this is like Steve said, people that are Pittsburgh sports figures, not the people that we've played against, but people that have played for or been associated with a Pittsburgh sports franchise. And then we're going to do our top 10. But we're going to start with sort of a best of the rest, just a bunch of honorable mentions that didn't quite make it into the top 10, and that's where we're going to start.
Okay, well, to start off, we're going to start with a guy who was here to probably just had a cup of coffee in Pittsburgh, but good old LeGarrette Blount. And this leads on to another person that I love to rip on, Bill Belichick. LeGarrette Blount got himself kicked off the Steelers so he could play for the Patriots. And how he did that was they were texting him. I don't know if it was McDaniel or actually Belichick. One of them was texting him, telling, if you were to get cut, we would have a roster spot for you. Well, I'm no expert in NFL tampering rules, but I'm pretty sure that's tampering. You can't do that to a current player. So what LeGarrette Blount did was he literally walked off the field before the game was over and forced Mike Tomlin to cut him because of his bad behavior, which it's just the most ridiculous, and nothing was done about it. Not anything. It's just, I just can't believe the Patriots got away with that. I mean, I guess I shouldn't. I mean, they do a million things that are 10 times worse, but
It hurt the Steelers, too, because they went into the playoffs that year. Le'Veon Bell ended up getting hurt in the last game of the season, and LeGarrette Blount was their capable backup. And they didn't have him, and I forget who they signed for that Baltimore playoff game. They had signed some guy off the street the week before. So they went into the playoffs without a running back because Blount had sort of played his way off the team. So not a guy. And then he went and won the Super Bowl with New England. So not a guy that Steelers fans remember very fondly.
I mean, he wasn't here very long, but and he's just a kind of a mediocre running back anyway. But it's just the whole fact that the way he conducted himself, that was ridiculous. So next up is another person that played for the Steelers that had a cup of coffee here, Michael Vick. Now, I think, I've made mistakes. We've all made mistakes. Nobody's perfect. There are things in your past that, are going to get brought up, and he did horrible things to dogs, and people love dogs. Mm-hmm. And he has this now held over his head for the rest of his life. Like Mike Florio just this year wrote an article how he shouldn't be allowed to even be associated with the NFL because he isn't paid. How much more does Mike Florio want from this man? He lost all his money, and he did a year and a half in jail for torturing animals. I mean, he didn't kill people, he killed animals. It's still bad, it's still wrong, it's not good. But I think once you've done the necessary steps that the legal system is set out for you, what more can Michael Vick do besides go play football and be a better person? And that's what he's done. So I just never understood I understand people are passionate and they protest this guy, but it's at what point do you forgive? Do you let this guy come back into society? Isn't this the whole point? He's learned his lesson. Right. Let the man live his life.
I'm with you, Steve. He was very repentant. Yeah, he
didn't get away with anything. No, people act like he got away with stuff.
He went to prison. He was sorry. He seemed like he did everything in his
power. He lost all his money.
And it's funny because I never liked Michael Vick. All the way back to him playing for Virginia Tech, I never liked Michael Vick. But when he came to the Steelers, I said the same thing. I said, look, the guy paid his dues, and he's allowed to have a life again and have a career again. But like you said, it's I love dogs. I have a dog. I do. I love dogs. It's a sensitive topic for people because I think if he would have killed a person,
people would be more forgiving.
People would have been more forgiving.
There's player Dante Stallworth ran over somebody in the street and doesn't get
Right. That's what I mean. So it's just the way it was. And so yes, he was widely hated. When the Steelers signed him, people vowed to never go to the games again. I remember people even protesting outside of the Heinz Field. So yeah, definitely a hated player.
Okay. Next up is a guy who has had more than a cup of coffee here. He's been a long-time quarterback, and that's Ben Roethlisberger. And people still, another person that's made their mistakes. And now maybe you could debate. I've had this debate with people I've worked with, actually somebody I work with. They think his marriage is a PR stunt just to cover up all the other charges that he had. And I don't know how you judge that from the outside. I mean, once again, this is a person that's made mistakes, and maybe you got to give them some forgiveness and leeway until, everybody, when they evaluate talent in the NFL, they always say, if you make one mistake, that's one mistake. But if you keep making that same mistake over and over again, then that's a character problem. And I haven't either Ben and the Steelers are covering up all these other, or he's learned the error of his ways and he doesn't do that anymore. So, these two guys are kind of in the same boat there. It's like people just don't want to forgive and forget, and I guess it's easier just to be angry at them.
Just to be a hater, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ben's tough, and Ben would have never come close to our top 10 list because a lot of people love Ben also, and he won two Super Bowls.
Yeah, I think outside of Bradshaw, he's the greatest quarterback to ever play for the Steelers.
Sure. So, but you're right. There was a lot of people that hate him. There was people that wanted him traded. I mean, every time the Steelers start to struggle or have a off season, a subpar season, it's Ben's fault and get rid of Ben, and he's a cancer in the locker room and so on and so forth. So
he fumbled on purpose, like people saying silliness like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of hate directed at Ben, and I agree with you, Steve. Most of it is unwarranted.
So next up, sticking with our Steelers, James Harrison. Now this guy is, in my opinion, and I think we've had more than one example, this guy's legitimately a jerk. Okay, and that's okay. That's okay. The world, there's enough room in the world for people that we might not necessarily aren't warm and fuzzy. And for what he does, that's part of his attitude. And, he worked really hard to develop himself he was probably a borderline NFL talent who worked himself into a Pro Bowl, if not borderline Hall of Fame player. Now, I've heard tons of anecdotal stories like of him just really being bad behavior and then doing the whole, I guess he was trying to stretch out his career. He jumped around the Patriots and the Bengals and, just doing stuff like that and, then talking bad about the Steelers. And I think he said some negative stuff about Ben and just, it's typical James Harrison. He is who he is.
I think in 10 years, James Harrison doesn't even sniff a list like this, because I think what people will remember is that he made, arguably the greatest play in NFL history when he returned the interception in the Super Bowl. But what people remember kind of now is that, like you said, he went to New England. We have this very unnatural hatred and obsession with the New England Patriots here in Pittsburgh, and God forbid he went and signed with the Patriots after the Steelers cut him, and so people never really forgave him for that. And like you said, he's done some things over the years that, like you said, he's not a warm and fuzzy guy. He's not Brett Kiesel or some of those like lovable guys.
But you know what? That's
defense.
Who he is. That's how he motivates himself, and I can't be angry with that. I don't hold that against him, because if that's how you motivate, look at how far it's taken him. Honestly, this guy was cut 2 or 3 times. There's a lot of other guys that have been in his situation haven't had the successful career that he's had.
So I think the theme of the list so far is we're sort of giving you guys that we think are consensus reviled sports figures, but we don't personally necessarily agree with some of those.
I think a lot of them, as we go further, are a mixed bag, and some are there's no mix.
Yes.
They're just
once we get into the top 10, I don't think there's a mixed bag at that point.
Yeah. Another guy that there really isn't a mixed bag on is Anthony Smith, the former safety for the Steelers. He decided to channel his inner Joe Namath against the playoff game against the Patriots and say, "I guarantee a win." And then he got burned like a bunch of times. Another great moment in Anthony Smith history was he had an interception against, I think it was Carolina or somebody, some garbage team. And he's dancing down the sidelines with the meaning of this interception, which led to Dick LeBeau pulling him as he came off. I just remember Dick LeBeau yelling at him about it. It's because it was just so stupid.
Yeah, Anthony Smith was not a guy that lasted very long, and yeah, people always remember that he tried to challenge the Patriots, and they just, the Patriots are like, "Who are you?" Tom Brady's like, "Who are you? You're not,
Yeah, you're not exactly Troy Polamalu back there.
Right.
Yeah, good old Anthony, and that was a Syracuse product. It was. So next up on our list is a mediocre quarterback for Pitt, Bill Stahl. Bill Stahl is probably reviled because he played in a bowl game where they only scored a field goal. The old Sun Bowl, which I'm surprised they even had Pitt back after that game.
They didn't score. I thought they lost 3-0.
Oh, no, that's right. No, they didn't score at all. That's right. Yeah. It was they didn't score any points. They didn't even score a field goal.
I liked Bill Stahl. He was a guy. I kind of like guys that play above what their talent level is, and I felt like that's what Bill Stahl was. He had 2 pretty good successful seasons as a starter. Almost took them to the Sugar Bowl his senior season. But he had a tendency to make mistakes at bad times, and certainly drew the wrath of Pitt fans.
Well, he had Dion Lewis to hand the ball off to at a big offensive line, and they had a decent defense. And I remember one story. I guess the Pitt fans were harassing him so bad. This was a game at Heinz Field that his father just got so tired of hearing it, he literally left the game. So that was kind of a harsh moment for Bill Stahl's family, and not a one that they probably prefer to be reminded of. But he's a Mount Washington kid, Seton LaSalle grad. I always thought of him as he was a good also ran. If he's not the guy driving the offense, if you have a Dion Lewis to drive your offense, he can fill in the gaps and make enough plays to get you to win. He's the game manager quarterback. He wasn't bad. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't great. So, Good old Bill. Now we get the rip on the media. Yay. Ron Cook, my favorite person. Does he even write letters in the newspaper?
So let's, in case folks might not know who Ron Cook is, for many years he was a columnist for the Post-Gazette, and then he also did sports talk radio on 93.7 The Fan. I don't know if he still does or not, to be honest, but he did for many years. So that's who Ron Cook is. And so I think when you're a opinionated, long-time columnist, because in Pittsburgh, probably in many other towns too, sometimes those guys that get those jobs, they're there for decades. So you hear from the same guy for years and years.
It's Pittsburgh's such a great sports town too. You can make a nice little living doing it.
Right. And so when you write for that long, and when you're as opinionated as Ron Cook is, you tend to have a lot of people, love-hate relationships with you.
Well, the 2 major things that I always kind of hold against him were, one time, this is a long time ago, back when Big East still played football, he basically said the Big East Conference wasn't any good not because of the strength of the football or the talent on the field, is because they played their games on Thursdays. And who knew playing your day on a certain, when you play your games on a certain day of the week, that affects the quality of the football? Who knew? I mean, Monday Night Football must have really stunk all these years. And, and it's also, he's just so typical of lazy media that don't go to the games, watch the game on TV. I can watch the game on TV and tell you what I saw too. Your point is to be there and tell me what I didn't see. So a few years ago, everybody was kneeling during the national anthem, and it spread to college, and one of the Pitt players did it. And Ron Cook could have swore that the Pitt football team never came out during the national anthem. Well, if Ron Cook would have attended a Pitt football game in the last 10 to 15 years, he would have known that they always came out for the national anthem. So that's just, to me, it's just, that's being a lazy reporter. And it's just, you should be better than that. That's probably more egregious. Ooh, I used the word egregious than the whole Big East football. And it's funny because he ranted and raved about the Big Ten and how they never play on Thursdays and never change their uniforms. Well, guess who has color rush uniforms and plays on Thursdays? That would be God's gift to college football, Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan. So there you go. The marketing people won.
Yeah, Ron Cook's a little up and down for me. He had a lot of really bad takes and often criticized the fans. And I think you pointed out, Steve, in a previous podcast, he was one of the guys that did not vote for Larry Fitzgerald for the Heisman.
Yeah.
But he every once in a while he would have some good columns too. I remember one in particular. I actually sent him a email that he replied to because he was writing these articles about Aaron Smith was going through this stuff. Aaron Smith, the defensive lineman for the Steelers, with his son, and he wrote these really nice articles about his family and his faith. And I just thought it was like well done, and it was a nice human story. And I was like, I often criticize this guy and everybody gets angry with him. It's like, if he writes something good, I should tell him, and I did. And he replied back.
Well, it's always good to add some balance. We're letting, since we're using the Star Wars, I guess, we're getting to the good side here. Not totally rip on Ron Cook, but sticking with our media people, Tim Benz, who I like. I like Tim Benz, even though, I don't always agree with him, but I always thought he made a fair point. And I was sad to see him go on his morning show. And I know there was some politics and stuff going on. I think he just should have stuck with it, quite honestly. I still understand why he quit his morning show over that.
He went to Boston, but then he came back.
Yeah. And he's a good sports guy. He really is.
I like Tim Benz too. And when he first came to Pittsburgh, way back in the early 2000s, the first thing I remember him was he was one of the people that made a big deal about Mario Lemieux playing in the 2002 Olympics, because Mario Lemieux wanted to win a gold medal for Canada, and how Mario Lemieux was betraying the Penguins by doing that. And I was like, this guy's awful. I just thought he was the worst, and I've grown to really like him over the years too. But if you read his articles in the Trib, he's currently a columnist for the Trib.
I do, yeah.
You will see a lot of, he even has a column every week called You Mad Bro.
Yeah, that's a good
where
one.
Where people he actually publishes angry
he
emails.
always likes to antagonize the Pitt fans too. But
he likes to
I don't hold
everybody.
But I don't hold it against it. It's all in good fun. I never felt like it was I always feel like it's in good fun. Yeah. And like I said, I don't always agree with him, but I like that he makes you think. And if somebody can engage you in that way, that's the sign of a good, columnist or opinion person.
But go read his columns and then read the comments or the You Mad column every week. A lot of people hate him.
Oh, yeah, and it's always, go back to Syracuse, you bum. It's like, it's just hilarious. But poor Tim, I wish he was back on the radio. I really do. Next up, sticking Mark Madden. And Mark Madden, you got to understand, it's a shtick. Right. It's like Kiss. Kiss really isn't knights in Satan's service here, people, okay? They're not sacrificing puppy dogs and stuff, okay? Mark Madden, if you watch wrestling has a heel, has a bad guy. That's Mark Madden's shtick, is to be the bad guy of Pittsburgh sports radio. And he does it well, and it's entertaining. And if you don't laugh at it, come on. I mean, that's the whole point. It's just, the only thing that kind of annoys me is he does this, and he does this just to get under people's skin, is he'll pick whoever the most popular Steeler at the time is.
Smith-Schuster right now.
Yeah. And who else I have? Bettis or Hines Ward.
Myron Cope back in the day.
Well, that was more personal, I thought.
Okay.
With him and Cope.
Okay. But basically what you're saying is he'll pick a really beloved Steeler figure.
Yeah, and it's just to antagonize. Right. Once again, it's just to get people going and stuff. He holds a grudge against the Steelers too because he thinks Dan Rooney got him fired. I forget off the Channel 4 used to have one of those late night roundtable shows, and he said something negative about the Steelers, and he thinks Rooney, who's passed away now, got him off that show. I don't know if that's true or not, but I find Mark Madden entertaining. Even my wife finds. I mean, if Michelle's laughing at Mark, he must be doing something right.
Yeah, I kind of like Mark Madden, but you're right. He will annoy you, and then you have to sort of catch yourself and be like, okay, don't get annoyed by this. This is on purpose. And like you said, Steve, his background was in wrestling. He was in WCW, and it's like going to watch a wrestling match and then getting really like furious that the bad guy wins the match. It's like
what?
It's a shtick.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a good wrestling bad guy. Who's a good wrestling bad guy? The Iron Sheik. What, the Iron Sheik beat Hulk? Oh no, Oh, it's just setting up for WrestleMania next week when the Hulk pins, or whatever.
That's a great, up to date reference to you.
Yeah, going all the way back to 1983, baby. I don't know CM Punk. I don't know. I don't really follow wrestling that closely, but we'll get torched over that one. The Bubster, and Bubby just annoyed me because he was a decent quarterback, but he never did anything that ever helped the Steelers win anything of any consequence. And then, like, when they need, okay, Bubby, we need you to throw that critical interception when you play for Denver so we can make the playoffs. Oh, look, now you're a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, Bubby.
The Bub.
Yeah, Bubby just wasn't, we covered this in our 80s Steelers podcast. The offense that was built around Bubby was putrid. So he was kind of set up to fail anyway. And he just wasn't a very good quarterback. And then he was sort of a goofball. And, I don't know. He was sort of entertaining, but then, it wore thin whenever he just started playing worse and worse.
Yeah, and the Swedish bikini team, I don't think he ever got them for Christmas. The good old Bubster. Matt Cook. He's like who's the Penguins have had other instigators over the years, Barnaby and Kasperitis, but Matt Cook was beyond the beyond on that one. I mean, it was just cheap shot after cheap shot after cheap shot, and it didn't make a difference. They still had, Steckel still was hitting Sidney Crosby in the head. It didn't matter. So what was the point of having Matt Cook? I think that's one of the nice things since Sullivan came in is they just gave up on the Ryan Reeves. It's like there's no point in it anyway. We're just going to get a fast skating team.
Matt Cook was actually a good player too. Not a great player, but he was actually could play hockey. And I think the hard thing about Matt Cook was he always forced you to like really make moral decisions.
You can't check a guy from behind into the boards. That's like hockey 101, man.
As a fan, when your guy hits the other guy, it's always righteous.
There's just no defending Matt Cook.
And Matt Cook just always forced you to say I don't know if I can really defend that. And he got some massive suspensions. One year, he was suspended right before the playoffs, which really hurt the Penguins in 2011. For something he had done at the end of the regular season. So, yeah, he always forced you to, try to defend the indefensible, and a lot of times you couldn't do it.
Good old Matt Cook. What coffee stand is he working at? Okay, we got I kind of got 3 pit ones here. We'll just rattle them off. We'll start with good old smiling Steve Peterson. He's he's a mixed reaction guy, I think. We'll start with the good. Pitt Sports in the 90s when he took over was an absolute train wreck. They were probably on the verge of almost losing their football program. But he did bring them back. He hired Walt Harris and brought the team back to at least respectability. And then as his second term, he did, for better or worse, I mean, that's a topic for another day, he did get Pitt into the ACC. So I would say that was his 2 big positive reactions. Now, the 2 negative things he did, and this still is going on today, they just had a bulletin board up. They still want to put a campus stadium as he got rid of Pitt Stadium, which to me, the longer they've been down at Heinz Field, I think the longer I see that's a mistake. Pitt should not be down at Heinz Field. They should have just remodeled Pitt Stadium. Now, granted, people think, oh, you put them back on campus, there's going to be full house every week. I went to a lot of games at Pitt Stadium where it was just as full as Heinz Field. And so I don't think the stadium it's bad that it's off campus, but it's not the only reason that Pitt has attendance problems. And then the bigger problem was he fired Dave Wannstedt and then hired Mike Hayward and Todd Graham. Mike Hayward, who ended up getting in some sort of domestic abuse situation. They had to fire him 2 weeks later. And then Todd Graham, a total carpetbagger, very mediocre coach, and just quite honestly a joke. He really, really is a joke when it comes to Pitt coaches, and that's saying something. Next up on my hit list parade of things that Pitt ADs is Scott Burns. I would call Scott Barnes the worst AD in Pitt history, and that's because he got rid of the most successful basketball coach, Jamie Dixon, that Pitt ever had, to hire his friend, Kevin Stallings, in the most joke search ever. And he only did it, I think Kevin Stallings only took the job at Pitt because his son was in the Pirates organization and he thought he would be able to see his son play baseball.
Was Kevin Stallings the guy that went 0-16 in the ACC?
Yes,
yeah.
Kevin Stallings is horrible. He doesn't even have as good a record as Dixon. I mean, it's horrible. I still don't understand. I understand the cronyism, but I didn't realize it was that bad. And that was just, those were three of the probably worst moves in Pitt history.
Yeah.
All right, who's up next? Go with Cliff Stout. He was a backup quarterback for the Steelers in the 80s. He was okay until he went to the Maulers. Or no, did he play for the Maulers?
No,
he played for a rival team.
He was the starter. Bradshaw was injured late in his career. Bradshaw's last season, he played 2 quarters in the whole season, and Stout was the starter that whole year. And they made it to the playoffs. They got blown out by the Raiders, and people really started to hate Cliff Stout because, first of all, the guy that is the successor to Terry Bradshaw is going to have a tough time anyway. But Stout wasn't very good, and I think his personality didn't rub off well on people. And he ended up playing in the USFL, not for the Maulers, for some other team.
Yeah, that's right. And they came to Pittsburgh.
To Pittsburgh to play the Maulers. And what happened? People threw snowballs at him.
Yeah. And I think the other team still won. I think the team he was on still won.
But people couldn't wait to go to that Maulers game just to throw things at Cliff Stout.
So I'll call Cliff Stout the Brian Greasy.
There you go. Give him the Brian Greasy award, yeah.
Yeah, Brian Greasy's only fault in life was that he wasn't John Elway. It's the same thing. You follow the man. It's even if you're a pretty decent quarterback, which obviously Cliff Stout probably wasn't, but
right.
I remember his son was supposed to come to Pitt, and that never worked out. But good old Cliff, he's dodging snowballs in Three River Stadium. Another good one, Cordell Stewart. Another guy's probably mediocre, treated unfairly. Rumors, like just persistent rumors, and they're still out there.
Yeah.
I mean, and you know what's ironic? If that happened today, he'd probably be celebrating.
Well,
he probably would make a whole reality show if he hasn't already had one.
Very mean-spirited rumors about his sexuality. Just stuff that had nothing to do with
football.
Football. I mean, Cordell had a lot of flaws on the football field and a lot of talent too. Very up and down career with the Steelers, but boy, people just had him getting arrested. Sports Illustrated even did an article where I guess Cordell actually went to the locker room and pulled the whole team together to address some of these rumors that were out there because they were that strong that he felt like he had to address it with the team. And that's really just, again, that has nothing to do with football. If you want to criticize his play on the field, that's fine. But it got a lot more personal than that with Cordell, and so he was very, very aided.
Yeah, if anybody has a reason to not like Pittsburgh, I would think it would be Cordell. And I think too, like some of it was he didn't take like you have the opposite of that where like Ben will throw an interception and it clearly wasn't his fault and he'll take the heat for it normally. Cordell was the opposite. It was like he would throw an obvious interception, like, not my fault. Like, and I think when you're the quarterback, you have to learn, even if it isn't your fault, you just take the heat, because you're the quarterback, and then he cried on the sidelines in Tampa,
Right,
and that,
right.
in football, that's, not manly.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I mean,
you got to remember, it was so, like, boy, we're getting old, but it's so different. That happened nowadays. I don't think it would be as big a deal, maybe.
maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I think ultimately, all that stuff was in there, but then he also threw a really costly interception in the '97 championship game. He threw two fourth-quarter interceptions in the '01 championship game. Yeah, we just did a podcast about the '95 Steelers, and we talked about, some guys have greatness and some guys don't. Cordell was in that latter category. He didn't have greatness. And it was tough because the Steelers had some really good teams that he led, and he could not get them over the hump and to a Super Bowl. And so, that combined with his personality, combined with crying on the sidelines, just made him a guy that people, especially towards the end, just did not like.
Yeah, that last year with Tommy Maddox, people were probably, and he never really had that much success anywhere else.
No.
Yeah. Dave Parker, great talent. I mean, the home run hitter, but had some off the field substance abuse issues. And why were people throwing batteries at him?
Yeah.
Like he wore a helmet out in the field, like, because I remember my dad who loved Dave Parker, like, still would talk. I guess I've never actually seen, but there's some throw he made in the All-Star game that's like some tremendous throw to get a guy out at home. Like, he could field. He was a 5-tool player. He could hit. He could field. Great player. He's not in the Hall of Fame either. And it's just like, I don't understand, like, why people hated Dave Parker. Was there an attitude thing?
It's a little bit before our time, I think. Dave Parker, his success came in the '70s. Like you said, he won 2 batting titles. I think he was the National League MVP. And I think it was during that whole Pittsburgh drug trial era. And he was a heavy cocaine user. I think it probably had a lot to do with that. But yes, people threw batteries at him at the River Stadium.
He had to wear a helmet. I mean, and it's a shame because he was a really good player. So maybe, I don't know if there's some attitude or, like, I don't know what it was. A cultural.
But when you when you get batteries thrown at you by the home fans, then I think you fall into the list of reviled.
Yeah. Terry Bradshaw. Once again, Pittsburgh hates quarterbacks. I think it's the easiest. It's the easiest target. It's like goaltender. Sure. Same thing. We'll get into that later too. But goalie and, quarterback, it's the two most obvious positions.
Right. Yeah, and Bradshaw's another guy who didn't endear himself, and who still, in the years since, has not endeared himself. Bradshaw is really, I hate to use the word bipolar because that's too strong of a word, but he'll say things and then, like, he'll say something completely opposite that goes against what he said previously. So he's bitter at Chuck Noll. He's bitter at the fans who cheered when he got hurt, and some of that's probably understandable. He also was very mistake prone. I mean, he won 4 Super Bowls. He also threw bad interceptions. He struggled early in his career. So very up and down, and a lot of fans didn't like him and haven't liked him since. He sort of left Pittsburgh, didn't come to Art Rooney's funeral, didn't come to Chuck Noll's funeral. A lot of fans hate him for that. So, yeah, tough.
Well, he kind of made up. He came back at Heinz Field. I remember they had a big, like, Terry Bradshaw day, and I thought maybe him and the fans and the organization at least. I know him and Chuck Noll, but Chuck Noll was not, Terry needed a hug, and Chuck Noll wasn't going to give you one.
Right.
And, I mean, that's the way, it is sometimes. You got to find it somewhere else, I guess. And then he said those things about Tomlin, like, I don't think Tomlin's a great coach and stuff. And, I mean, I think at the time maybe that goes under, like, we were talking about hot takes and bad takes. I think after this season, that's probably a little bit of a bad take there.
Yeah. Just a guy that's,
hot and cold, up and down.
Hot and cold. Very appreciated. He won us 4 Super Bowls, but boy, a lot of people don't like him.
Roger Marino.
Yeah, Roger Marino was so we can lump him in, probably him and Howard Baldwin in the same category.
Well, we've got him coming up.
Okay, so in the '90s,
unless you want to hold off on him, you want to save him for Howard.
Yeah, let's hold off.
Okay. Bob Round Tripper Kipper. Bob Kipper was a middle relief pitcher before they were cool. And in the 80s, he seemed to always give up home runs. That was where he got his nickname, Bob Round Tripper Kipper. It was a fun fact, he gave up the 500th home run to Mike Schmidt, the great Phillies third baseman. So he has that going for him. And I think he's like a minor league baseball coach somewhere. But Bob was pretty mediocre, and he was pretty good at giving up home runs.
Yeah, and remember the Three Rivers. Remember the bullpens at Three Rivers Stadium were like sort of on the side of the field. So you had a lot of seats like surrounding the bullpen, and that wasn't good for Bob Kipper.
he got harassed.
Yeah,
old round tripper. How many you giving up today? Marian Hossa. He's a paycheck. He was a rental player for one season for the Penguins, and I think people just hated him because he left after 1 year.
Well, he left to go to the team
Red Wings
that had just beaten us in the Stanley Cup final, and that's why people. So we did a podcast about the 2009 Penguins. Again, go back and listen to that if you haven't already. We talk a lot about Marian Hossa there. I don't personally hold anything against him, and honestly, the Penguins got the last laugh and all that because they won the Stanley Cup the next year. But people still really hold it against Marian Hossa for leaving for the team that had just beaten us.
Yeah, good old Marian. He picked wrong. Every Steelers offensive coordinator ever.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way. I mean, Todd Haley, Bruce Arians, all the way back to Joe Walton, Ron Earhart. I mean, you could just go on and on and on. When the Steelers lose, it's almost always either the quarterback's fault or a coach's fault. And if it's an assistant coach's fault, it's always the offensive coordinator, always. This last season, where the most recent season where Ben Roethlisberger got hurt and we had Duck Hodges playing quarterback, that was the fault of the offensive coordinator for not being creative enough. Meanwhile, you have a guy in there that has no business being an NFL quarterback and you're just trying to not have him make a mistake. Again, everybody will always blame the offensive coordinator. It doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter what his record is. It's always that guy's fault.
I think, too, a lot of these offensive coordinators, they didn't have a lot of quarterback to work with. Like you said, like Duck Hodges. Is Bruce Arians or who's the other one? Todd Haley really that great? Or was it Ben Roethlisberger,
Right.
What did Todd Haley do in Cleveland? He was okay in Kansas City. Bruce Arians, I don't know. I guess you could argue Bruce Arians is probably a better offensive coach than you think. He's made more with less, but
you could argue all that. All I can tell you is that when he was here, he was the bad guy. It was always his fault, And then when
he gets Ben sacked too much. Well, that's why he got fired. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
he's too buddy with the quarterback.
Yeah. Ben gets hurt too much, so they bring in Todd Haley, who revamps the offense and has Ben get rid of the ball quicker. And then what does everybody say? Oh, they let Bruce Arians go, and now he's coaching the Cardinals and doing great. Why did we ever get rid of Bruce Arians? So you can't.
Meanwhile, Bruce
win.
is burning through 4 quarterbacks in a year. Yeah,
you can't. The offensive coordinator is always just going to be a target.
He's the bad guy. End of story. Let's see who's up next on our best of the rest. Todd Graham, we've covered him. He literally has no soul. That's true.
Yeah. Todd Graham would have been in my top 3, but we were going for sort of a consensus pick here, and so Todd Graham was only here for 1 season, and I didn't know human beings couldn't have souls, but Todd Graham has no soul, and he not only left after that first season. He sent a text message to one of the assistant coaches to ask him to relay to his players. This is before the season had ended. That he was taking another job. He picked up his smartphone. Yeah. He was like, "Please tell players, I am sorry, taking other job. Wish you well, Todd." And the season wasn't over yet.
But whose fault is that? Because he had done that at Tulsa. What did you expect from this guy? And the whole thing was I watched a year of this guy coaching. What was so special about Todd Graham? He was mediocre as mediocre could be.
That was the other thing. So Todd Graham had this, they called it the high octane offense. And we ran all these quick no huddle plays, and it didn't work. We there was a couple games where we had like big leads that we blew because we weren't nursing the lead at all. It was a failed experiment. Then he left and sent a text message. Didn't even have the guts to tell his players face to face. I can't talk anymore about Todd Graham. It gets me too riled up. Let's move on.
Moving on. Someone controversial. I'm surprised he's on the list. I like this guy. I don't hate him, but Carl Krauser. And I think this goes back to it's almost like the Harrison, like you have to have this attitude to play point guard in big time college basketball. He wants the ball with 10 seconds to go and he's going to score. And that's the type. I mean, I just remember that game was it the Sweet 16 or might have been the round before where Wisconsin, he has 4 fouls on him and he just drives in there and puts it in to put Pitt up by 1 or 2 points and win the game. That's the type of person it takes to win that game. You know, you got to have the guy that's going to put his X up after he makes a free throw. And I realize that, Pittsburgh is kind of more of a lunch pail, blue collar, and that isn't Carl Krauser per se. But I just think he was a really good point guard. He's a little bit of different point guard. He's not like people seem to like Brandon Knight, who's more of the passer and distributor, whereas Krauser was more of the playground, drive in and get you some points. And I really like that style of play.
So I think there was two reasons people didn't like Carl Krauser. You already touched on the first one, is that he was sort of a me first kind of player. And not only did that not fit with the city mentality, it also didn't really fit with Ben Howland's kind of defensive first teams.
It was under Dixon more, but
same thing.
Yeah.
Dixon had the same coaching philosophy, and then I think the second reason is that Carl Krauser had like a really, really punchable face.
Wow.
He just had a very punchable face, and he always made this face if something didn't go well. He looked like a little kid who was about to cry. Yeah, if you ever see
he did have some immaturity. I remember one time, I think against Bradley, like shoved the guy after the guy made a basket, and he did do some stuff like that.
If you ever been around a toddler who's starting to not get their way and starts to get that wrinkled up face where they're like the tears are about to flow, that was like the Carl Krauser face. So people just weren't fans of Carl Krauser, and then I don't think he ever did anything big enough to sort of redeem any of those things. He didn't win any big tournament games. They always lost in the Sweet 16 when they had Krauser, and really when they had everybody else.
Well, he wasn't an NBA talent, that's for sure. But he was a good college player, and like I said, I think sometimes you need that guy, a point guard, that's just like, okay, give me the ball, I'm going to win the game, and that's just the nature of the beast with him. Yeah. Whereas Brandon Knight was more, give me the ball, I'm going to find.
Playmaker,
In Levance Fields was kind of the same, but not as Levance Fields a little more team player, maybe. So maybe that's why he's not as on this list. Well, that's the best of the rest. I guess we're ready for the top 10. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Psyched up for the top 10?
Let's start the countdown.
Number 10, we're going to start with some politicians. Who doesn't love them, guys? We got 2 guys that are tied for this. That would be former Mayor Tom Murphy and former Governor Ed Rendell. And the reason they are on this list is because the whole Plan B fiasco. So back in the good old days of the high-heady days of when sports teams would actually pay for their own stadiums, that was pretty fun. The owners figured out that the stadiums are like a white elephant, and that ties you to the town. So we'll make the taxpayers pay it so we can leave and threaten to move the team, and you're stuck with the stadium. It's a great deal for billionaire owners.
Right.
So what they did was they had to put it to a referendum to raise the taxes to build Heinz Field and PNC Park. Well, everybody voted against that because, hey, Roonies, you have $1 billion, pay for your own stadium. Well, they said, we don't like that. You're going to pay anyway. And they got the mayor on board, who was Mayor Murphy. So they said, they didn't say no. They just said they wanted a different plan. So Plan B, they basically opened the Brinks Vault to a city that was in debt at the time and let both stadiums be built with public funding, PNC Park and Heinz Field. And you can debate that any way you want. That's what happened.
Yep.
So roll around, 10 years later, 8 years later, the Penguins are playing in the Civic Arena, which truly, they really did need it was a bad place to watch hockey. So they really did need. So the Penguins come out with this. Pennsylvania decides in all its wisdom it's going to legalize gambling. Well, the Penguins get in with this group called the Isle of Capri, and they come up with basically no taxpayer funded. All you have to do is give them a gambling license and collect like $8 million a year and get out of the way. All you have to do is get out of the way. Just get out of the way. You make money. They build a stadium. No taxpayer money used. Well, that wasn't good enough for the people in charge at the time, who was Murphy and Ed Rendell. And they decided, well, I'm going to prove a point, especially Mayor Murphy said, well, we're not just going to build your stadium. So they did not end up getting their license, and they made them take the taxpayer money. And in the negotiations, Ed Rendell literally was sitting there pounding on the table at the Penguins during these negotiations like he's freaking Khrushchev up at the UN. I'm sure Ed Rendell, when he was negotiating with, his buddy Jeffrey Lurie and the Eagles and whoever owns the Flyers, was doing that to them, I'm sure. So, and Ed Rendell is, he's just as bad as Murphy, and thank God they're both off doing something else with their lives at this point.
And I can't remember, Bob O'Connor was the mayor at one point during that too, and I don't remember.
Well, he had passed away, yeah.
Well, but Murphy was before O'Connor,
yeah.
So, but it was really, what I remember about the casino license was they were going to give a casino license to somebody in Pittsburgh. Like they had designated one license was going to go to somebody in Pittsburgh, and there were 3 groups vying for it, and the Penguins, like you said, had hooked on with that Isle of Capri group. And so if you just give it to them, you're going to build a casino anyway. And if you give it to them, then we get a free arena without any taxpayer money.
Yeah.
And they ended up giving it to a guy.
Barton. They gave it to Barton, who never had the money to build it, ended up dying, and the Penguins got it anyway.
The Penguins didn't get it.
No, who got it? Somebody else ended up getting it.
Somebody else, but they gave it to a guy that didn't have the resources to actually build a casino. So they botched the whole thing, and it's so typical. I mean, I don't want to certainly get into politics in this podcast, but regardless of your political affiliation, there's just a long list of just bungling,
It was all political posturing. It was, that really changed my view on politics. Is I used to think it was just, if you paid a politician off, they went on their way. This was all about, you have to do it our way, the way we say it. And that's what it really came down to. There
was some, just their reasons for picking that Barden over the Penguins group made no sense. It made
no financial sense.
It wasn't a business decision. No. It was politicians insulated in their little political world making decisions that weren't good. So a lot of anger certainly at the politicians related to how they handled some of the arena and stadium situations.
Sticking with the good old Penguinis, the guy that created all this mess with the Penguins, that would be Roger Marino and Howard Baldwin, although I blame more Baldwin.
Yeah, agreed.
He put the Penguins into bankruptcy. He signed like a really big deal with Mario Lemieux that he knew he couldn't pay for. And then he made a really awful Penguins movie called Sudden Death, which is basically Die Hard in the Civic Arena, but there's no Alan Rickman.
Yeah.
Which, if you don't have Alan Rickman, I think he kind of lost lost the whole movie. And Van Damme instead of Bruce Willis. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, the Baldwin took over the franchise from the DeBartolo family as they were winning Stanley Cups in the early 90s. So you had this highly successful franchise with the best player in the world at the time. You had all kinds of fan interest. I mean, Pittsburgh was a hockey town at that point. How you go from 1992 on top of the world winning Stanley Cups, games being sold out, to 1999 having to declare bankruptcy, I mean, that just says it all about Howard Baldwin. Roger Marino was a Boston investor who was supposed to come in and right the ship. He made things worse. So that ownership group it almost literally ruined the franchise. I mean,
on a positive note, because Mario signed that big, it's like a bankruptcy sale, and the only way to right the ship was Mario just took the team. It's like, fine, since you can't pay me, just give me the team.
Just give me the team, and that's the only reason we still have a team here today, to be honest. But that was because of Mario And Mario lost a lot of money doing that.
Yeah.
That should be noted.
And that goes back to the thing too with the arena was like then Mario had to play this whole political game. Remember that? Oh, I'm visiting Kansas City, and that was all because of the politicians.
Right.
So I mean, Mario got kind of the shaft on that, but to his credit and the person that he is, you know, he really bailed the city and the team out twice.
Yes.
Thank goodness for Mario. He's a legend.
Number 8.
Number 8. That would be Dwayne Washington and Chad Scott. Years of giving Steeler fans heart attacks there as their defensive back play was not quite up to snuff there.
You know what the hard thing about Dwayne? So there's been lots of bad cornerbacks in Steeler history. Dwayne Washington and Chad Scott, they weren't awful. Like they were good enough to stay on the team for like 8 years. But man, did they give up a lot of big plays and get burned a lot.
Dwayne kind of reminds me of a half step slow Ike Taylor. Like he never got like till the end when he was finally done. He never got like flat out burned. But like something weird would happen. Like the ball would bounce. He had terrible hands. Like,
he had terrible positioning. He'd be right on a guy.
But the guy would still catch the ball.
Because he'd just have his back turned or whatever, like the wrong way. Yeah, you're right. He wasn't slow. He just never was in the right position.
But Chad Scott probably should have been a safety. I've often thought that. Like he just, like especially after the first couple years, like because he was big too. Chad Scott was big.
He was a number one draft pick too, and I think that might be why they stuck with him as long as they did because he had a lot of pedigree.
Yeah, he was more. I saw him get burned just flat out, like people like run by him. Whereas Dwayne, like I never felt like people like ran by him. He just was like, whoops, whoa, you know.
The thing I always remember about Dwayne Washington is in the first couple of years at Heinz Field, they always play this public service announcement at some point during the game, and the public service announcement is, hey fans, please respect each other, don't throw things on the field, blah, blah, blah. It's a standard thing that they play, and for some inexplicable reason, those first few years, they had Dwayne Washington record the message.
I could imagine people were excited about that.
So, you know, somebody would catch a touchdown over Dwayne Washington's head, and then during the TV timeout, it's like, hey, fans, this is Dwayne Washington. Just want to make sure everybody respects each other. And it's like, boo, we hate you. I mean, I always felt bad for Dwayne that he was the hey, everybody, let's be nice guy that they chose. And they never did that again. They always had, Craig Wolfley or like some retired guy or some media guy do that announcement years later. They never again had an active player do it because poor Dwayne always got the wrath of the stadium every time he came up on the scoreboard.
Poor Dwayne. Couldn't catch a break. Number 7, and maybe should have been higher, but good old Operation Shutdown, Derek Bell.
So describe what Operation Shutdown was, in case people don't know.
So Derek Bell was a typical Major League Baseball player that had been a Major League Baseball veteran for a long time. And he was on the backside of his career. He was still an okay player, but not probably a starter, and he was an outfielder, and the Pirates had other outfielders they wanted to compete with him for his position. Well, Derek Bell took exception to this, thinking, well, I should just earn my spot because I've been in Major League Baseball for a million years, and nobody's going to tell me when I should sit or stay or whatever. So he said, if I knew there was a competition, I'm just going to go into Operation Sit Down and sit on my boat or whatever and not do anything. And that just, for some reason the fans took exception to that. They don't like paying, $50 a ticket to watch a guy not care,
Yeah, that was, the thing about Derek Bell, first of all, he was a guy that burned the Pirates. Like, I remember that. Like you said, he wasn't the greatest player, but he was good. And it just seemed like every time he played against us, he always had some kind of big hit. And then you sign him, and that's never going to go over well with fans where you're making, 20 times what the average person makes. And you're like, well, I'll just shut it. I'll just go into Operation Shutdown. And the fans and the organization were like, go right ahead.
Yeah.
The funny thing about Operation Shutdown, little known fact, Derek Bell never did play baseball again. So technically Operation Shutdown's still active.
Wow.
Because
So he got shut down.
yeah, this was I think 2002, and he never played again. So technically, he's been shutting it down ever since. And
Well, he talked himself right out of the league, didn't he? Smooth.
Operation Shutdown is still active. So kudos to Derek Bell for sticking with his goals.
Well, number 6, but probably should have been higher, would be one Antonio Brown.
Yeah, so man,
The list of crazy that has gone on with him, and a great player, another guy that worked really hard to get where he's going, but the space between the $1 million talent and 10-cent head, how much money did he literally lose himself by his behavior? If he just would have been, imagine if the Patriots would have had him against the Titans, they probably would have won.
I know.
I mean, and he literally would have made more than enough money. And then the whole helmet thing, and
Right.
like
With the Raiders, yeah.
yeah, I don't understand what and even Rosenhaus at the back. I mean, when Drew Rosenhaus cuts ties, boy, you're in trouble.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's tough because Antonio Brown. In my lifetime as a Pittsburgh sports fan, there are 3 players who I feel like were the most exciting players to watch. Not necessarily my favorites, but the most exciting athletes to watch. And I would order them like this. Number 1, Mario Lemieux. Number 2, Antonio Brown. And number 3, Larry Fitzgerald. Antonio Brown was so fun to watch play football. He was so good at his position. And then he just torpedoed his whole career. And he, before that, he wasn't exactly stable before that. But I don't know. You kind of felt like he was almost like Ricky Henderson or one of those guys that maybe was a little out there, but, was still a good player. And you could just sort of ignore when he live streamed the locker room after the playoff game or when he threw the Gatorade bucket on the sideline or whatever. But then, eventually the crazy overtook the sanity. And, yeah, the stuff he pulled to get out of Pittsburgh, the stuff he pulled in Oakland, the stuff he pulled in New England, and the stuff he's been pulling ever since.
He might never get back in the NFL, and that's a shame.
He might not. I mean, and I think people definitely revile Antonio Brown, which is why he's on this list. I think the reason we don't have him higher is because, like we said, he had all those great years and great memories, and hopefully someday we can remember him for that. And then number 2, he needs actual help. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, you get the feeling there's something. Yeah.
Yeah. There's guys that are jerks and what a jerk, but he seriously needs help and
well, I don't want to see him like hurt himself.
Yeah,
that's how I kind of feel like this is. You feel like that's the way he's trending right now, and it's like it'd just be nice, like even if he never played football again, just to have a healthy, long life where
work out some of your issues.
Yeah,
So it's hard for me to put him higher, but definitely a guy that you mention his name in Pittsburgh and you don't get a good reaction.
One guy that will slip in here, 6A maybe. 6B, Rashard Mendenhall, everybody's favorite Al Qaeda sympathizer. He didn't get why we had to kill Osama bin Laden. Kind of slipped into politics. Probably more reviled because he fumbled in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, fumbling in the Super Bowl against Green Bay made him reviled. Never lived up to that potential. He was a first-round draft pick and never lived up to that potential. And I think his last season in Pittsburgh, there was a game against the Chargers where he literally didn't show up for the game. I think he might have been hurt, but he didn't show up. He was still supposed to come to it was at Heinz Field, and he just went AWOL.
He's like, I'm out.
He was just a guy that was a little bit out there also, and not fond memories of Rashard Mendenhall.
Which leads us to number 5, everybody's favorite Steeler quarterback, Neil O'Donnell. Mr. I don't throw interceptions unless it's to Larry Brown in the Super Bowl to cost you the Super Bowl. But we covered Neil pretty in depth there on the Super Bowl 30 podcast, the one season. Neil was a mediocre quarterback, had a pretty good year with the Steelers, and then never did much of anything after that. And people just really rip on him, and probably rightfully so. I mean, those 2 interceptions cost us the game, and I can see why people wouldn't like him. And then, the leaving for free agency. But I mean, like, I think the Steelers kind of had the last laugh on that. He really didn't do much of anything after.
Right. But that's his legacy in Pittsburgh. He threw the Super Bowl away to a guy that was covering grass.
Well, that grass might have scored. You don't know. Number 4, jumping back to hockey, would be one Jaromir Jagr. So we already covered the Slovak part with Marian Hossa, so I guess we'll hit the Czech part of the country with Jaromir Jagr. Jagr, I don't think people were as mad when he left when Ted Leonis of the Capitals signed him to a bunch of money. I don't think that was people kind of saw the handwriting on the wall with the Penguins. I don't think that's what ticked him off. I think what ticked him off was then the I would play for Mario for league, and then, I'll go play for the Flyers instead.
Yeah.
That's probably what really irritated people more with Jagr, but that's how Jagr's been the last couple of years. He's just been one of those veterans that has been hanging on to just get the last couple bucks out of his career. And I mean, how mad can you really get, I guess, about all of that?
Well, he was a guy, and again, when he was here, he was such a great player. He might have been the most clutch. I talked about the most exciting guys I've ever seen. He might have been the most clutch. You just got him in like overtime of a playoff game, and he was the guy. And so he was great. But man, he had a bad attitude sometimes when he was here. He was another guy like Bradshaw who just...
He would pout.
He would pout, and he would say things that were completely opposite, like you said about, I'd play for Mario for the league minimum, but then he went and played for Philadelphia for a lot of money. He just was a guy that was very inconsistent, what he said and did not endear himself to people, supposedly has a very fractured relationship with Lemieux. There's a great picture from 2 or 3 years ago. The NHL had like a 100th anniversary celebration, and they took a picture with Lemieux and Jagr and some of the other all-time great Penguins. And everybody kind of has their arm around each other, and Lemieux and Jagr are kind of standing next to each other like this. And so it's
no hard feelings there. Huh?
Yeah.
Good old Yags. Number 3, another favorite whipping boy of sports fans is the goalie. And that the goalie that probably gets the most abuse around here would be Tom Barrasso, or who's that? The one announcer would always say it funny, Barrasso, or I don't know if that was Doc Emmerich, but probably gave up that one goal against the Islanders. Somebody shot a puck from halfway across the rink and it went in. He was standoffish, didn't like the media.
That's an understatement.
Yeah. Wasn't endearing to the fans that much. Won a Vezina, but not here.
Right.
Won a couple Stanley Cups.
Well, and that's the thing. Like he won 2 Stanley Cups. He'll always be remembered for that. I think some people remember him more fondly. But boy, he was not a nice person. He berated young goaltenders. Patrick Lalime was a guy that the Penguins had, who Barrasso just saw any young goaltender as a threat to him. And like you said, with the media, he just was just mean and standoffish to everybody. I think the thing I'll always remember about sort of the legacy that Barrasso left was in spring of 2000, the Penguins were making trade deadline deals, and Craig Patrick had struck a deal to trade Barrasso to the Ottawa Senators, and they were going to get Ron Tugnut, a goaltender, in return. They were going to get some other players in return. At this point in his career, Barrasso was definitely at the tail end of his career, and Craig Patrick Craig Patrick came out and said this publicly, that he was, quote, afraid to call Barrasso on the phone and tell him he had been traded. He was literally afraid to do that and almost didn't make the trade because he was afraid to have to call Barrasso and tell him about it. Now, that's his job, and he did it, obviously. But I think that kind of tells you all you need to know about the way people interacted with Tom, or the way Tom Barrasso interacted with people.
Yeah, boy, and Craig Patrick, he had to deal with Herb Brooks.
Yeah.
Number 2, and this guy's pretty consensus here, Barry Bonds. Probably one of the greatest Pirates, outside of Honus Wagner. Never played in the minor leagues, went straight to the pros. Was a great player, all-time home runs leader, hit a lot of home runs for the Pirates. Very good fielder. General all-around jerk. A lot of arrogance there, I guess. Spoiled kind of professional baseball player stuff. I think he said, comments, I'd have played for Jim Leland for nothing. Another kind of like those contradict you, and then you go sign with the Giants for a lot of money. He ended up never winning a World Series. Got involved in the whole steroids things. But Bonds definitely around here, definitely. Mark Madden, that's another guy. Mark Madden loves to hold up just to antagonize people. But you can't argue with his stats and his talent. It's just, he wasn't always warm and fuzzy.
No. I mean, you can't. He was, even before he started taking steroids, he was just one of the all-time great baseball players. Like you said, he could do everything: field, run, hit for power, hit for average.
Yeah.
Won 2 MVP awards with the Pirates, won a bunch of other MVP awards with the Giants. But another guy that just didn't endear himself to the fans, his teammates. Him and Jeff Kent had a huge dispute in his teammates on the Giants. Just him and Van Slyke didn't get along. And so, yeah, people didn't like Barry Bonds, and for good reason. Nobody liked Barry Bonds throughout baseball, not just people in Pittsburgh. And I think, when he left, and again, free agents have left Pittsburgh before and not been hated. It was right after he failed to throw out Sid Bream.
Yeah, it's like you're this great Gold Glover in left field, and you can't throw out Sid Bream on one leg.
Sid Bream. Little known fact: Sid Bream had one leg.
Yeah, he was basically running a 3-legged race.
Yeah, he was hopping on one foot to home plate. So that definitely hurt. The fact that if you watch the Ken Burns baseball documentary, they do a whole thing on Barry Bonds, and his father was Bobby Bonds, who was a Major League Baseball player, and his godfather is Willie Mays, who obviously is an all-time great. And they talk about how Bobby Bonds and Willie Mays taught Barry Bonds, who spent a lot of time as a kid with those two guys, to have this chip on their shoulder, chip on his shoulder. And I'm not sure why.
Maybe
certainly
thought it was motivation. I don't know.
Well, I mean, Willie Mays and Bobby Bonds, Willie Mays especially, played in an era where black players weren't even allowed to play in the major leagues. So if Willie Mays had a chip on his shoulder, it was for pretty good reason. And maybe some stuff happened to Barry Bonds that caused that, but according to this Ken Burns documentary, that was taught, and he never really let that go. And so, he was a very tough person to deal with for everybody, and was not well liked by the fans. And when he left Pittsburgh, I think a lot of people said good riddance.
All right, you ready for number one? And this is a pretty easy number one here. That would be Mr. Bob Nutting Jr., the owner of the Pirates and least successful sports franchise in the city. That would be you, Mr. Nutting Jr. Own it, live it, love it. He's done nothing with the team. I'm just going to, in his defense, he does have two forces that work against him in baseball, being in a small market, is the big markets don't share the revenue of the local TV money, and the unions like it that way because then they can get their veteran membership all the money from the Yankees and Red Sox and the other teams with the big. So that's the two forces that are allied against him. Now, granted, you can still put money into payroll and, make money that way, but he doesn't seem to. They seem to be content with losing or just, putting out a half rear-ended effort most of the time.
Yes.
I mean, it's a shame. They have a beautiful baseball park, and when they do have success, they don't try to sustain it. So, I guess if you like to go skiing, he's a good guy. He owns Seven Springs. And, I'm not one to tell people how to run their business or spend their money. You can do that however you want, but don't expect me to show up and spend tickets to your baseball game. And last time I checked, you got 82 of them a year to sell, and I'm not the one with the problem, I'm not one with the payroll to make. So,
yeah, Bob Nutting, his whole business strategy, like you said, is, run the team, to make a profit, run the team on the cheap so you can maximize your profit. It's not about winning. It's not about anything that has any benefit for the
That's
fans.
fine. You can run your team any way you want. I don't have to watch it.
Yeah, I think in Pittsburgh though, number one, the Pirates have a pretty rich history, so a lot of people felt betrayed by that. And then number two, the stadium that you're playing in was built with public funds. So I think if you're running a hardware store that way, okay, fine, that's your hardware store. I think a sports franchise, you have a little bit more obligation to the community.
So you're calling it more of a public trust?
Yeah. I mean, it's still a private business. I'm not going to get into that gray area, but there is a little bit more. It's different with a sports franchise. You have the whole community that it's trying to rally around that. You have a publicly funded stadium that you're playing in. And
he can move the team, and with that, he can move the team anytime he wants. He can always pull that card out of his back pocket.
He won't though, because he's making tons of money this way. And like you said, they had some success in the mid 2010s, and he just chose to, to not try to. Some owners would say, okay, we're going to win now. We're going to do it. We're going to put whatever it takes to win now. And he never had a desire to do that. And it went from a 99-win season right back to being in the tank. And, but people keep coming, and so he'll keep doing it. And it's sad. It's sad that that's what baseball in Pittsburgh has become. And a lot of people are apathetic. Even the people that come to the games, a lot of people come just for a night out.
Yeah, it's hot dogs and pierogi races and beer and whatever
but
else.
The days
hey, whatever gets you in the door, man.
The days of the Pirates invoking the same kind of passion that the Steelers and Penguins do, it's hard to imagine those days coming back unless there's a different owner.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That's our top list there. If you didn't agree with them, too bad. That's our list.
Well, you can always go on our Twitter feed at Pittsburgh Sports Memories. Tell us where we're wrong, if you think we're wrong.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to our podcast. It's always greatly appreciated, and we'll catch up with you next time.